Let's bring in our guest. Jeff Weiner has covered the George Zimmerman case from the very beginning for the Orlando Sentinel, and Rich Benjamin is a senior fellow at Demos. Thanks so much, both of you, for joining me. Rich, I want to start with you because, you know, the racial undertones, I mean, 6.5 hours on the stand, a contentious back and forth, as I mentioned, but very uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people in this country, and that's really what sparked this conversation, because it was sort of race and class. Give me your thoughts about it, what you saw.
It was horrific to watch, for me personally, a lot of this testimony, because it's coming in the context of this week, and we've seen the VRA case decision, we've seen the Paula Deen case, and so the reactions to the trial, specifically against Rachel, they had a lot of dog whistle racism, i.e. racism that is operating like a dog whistle. You have to listen to hear it. Yeah. And so it made people's nerves raw.
You know, one of the things I want to follow up, because it was sort of middle-aged white men versus Jeantel. Rachel Samra wrote for the Global Grind this week, and she says, quote, "It seems the middle-aged white men on both sides of this case are totally unaware of what Rachel's life is like. A 19-year-old high school student of Haitian descent who knows nothing more than the few block radius she's grown up in. The cultural differences here are exponential." And sort of to the point that you're making, part of what struck me is, I don't know that everybody understood the dog whistle politics, but certainly I think people understood that there was just a clash of cultures, a clash of understandings that was at times very tense.
Of course, and if you have a poor case on your hands, then the strategy is going to put her on trial and to make her seem exotic and incredible. She was meant to be the unreliable witness, someone whose testimony...
But also it seemed like they were trying to otherize her, right? With part of that.
That's how you do that, though. That's how you make her unreliable, is to make her otherized, as you put it.
Well, and we have seen some otherizing of our president and other prominent African-American and minority figures in this country. So I think for some of us it was painfully familiar, and I think for others it may have been an introduction to what that means and what that looks like.
It is. For many people, it was painfully familiar, this thing when you're trying to speak, when you're trying to bear witness to your friends who have served in injustice or have been done in injustice, and then you're being made to look like a monster. So for many people it was. And we saw this across the social media, the Twitter feeds and the Facebook, people standing up for her, thank goodness.
Jeff, you know, you've been following this case from the very beginning, and obviously it has had a real impact on the state and the community. And specifically, though, to Jeantel's testimony, do you have a sense of how that is playing with the jury? It's all women, 5 white and 1 minority.
Well, it's very interesting. Race has kind of been bubbling under the surface of this case since the trial started. You know, the prosecution wasn't allowed to say that Trayvon Martin was racially profiled. They just said profiled. It came up again when they introduced Zimmerman's prior calls to police in which he reported African Americans as suspicious. It really came front and center during Rachel Jeantel's testimony, and the reaction was all over the place. You know, at first people seemed almost to be ridiculing her, or thought that Don West, the defense lawyer, was ridiculing her. But as her testimony went along, it was so clear that, you know, she was uncomfortable being there. You know, she revealed that part of the reason why there was this barrier between her and Don West was that English was not only not her first language, it wasn't even her second language, it was her third language after Creole and Spanish. And the reaction from the community seemed to completely flip. People were like, you know, this poor young woman who's on the stand testifying and just kind of being grilled by this defense attorney. I saw a lot of support for her in social media.
You know, Jeff, the other thing that I thought was interesting, I mean, she came off, at least to me, as very sincere, and she seemed scared. I mean, this is part of why I feel like the part of the clash of cultures was not just racial, but this felt like this is somebody who has not dealt with sitting in front of a court, you know, in her daily life. I mean, this was a unique experience. She talked about how embarrassed she felt about not going to the funeral, but how she didn't want to see the body. I mean, it was clear that this was a painful experience for her, and one that she's sort of been thrust into in many ways.
Right, and the thing is, we've been calling her the state's star witness for months now. She testified on the stand that she didn't even realize at first that she'd be a witness at all. She thought that if she was going to be a part of the case, that the police would contact her rather than the other way around. You know, she said she didn't realize when she was giving her first statement to Trayvon Martin's family's attorneys that was going to be a key piece of evidence in the case. You know, kind of the through line of all of her testimony and her explanations for why she said she was in the hospital when she wasn't during Trayvon Martin's wake was all about reluctance. She didn't want to be a part of this case. She said over and over again, you know, this was not where she wanted to be in this role of kind of the key, the important witness.
I thought it was interesting, whereas, you know, it felt a little bit, the demeanor towards her seemed a little bit hostile, that she wasn't so comfortable being there, but then there was another witness who followed, who also seemed like a reluctant witness, and he sort of had a different experience. I want to shift gears, Rich, because there's criticism within the African-American community as well of Rachel, and some came to her defense, and some were very critical. And I want to put on a full screen of what was written for Ebony. This, the quote says, "What many African Americans in our social media community secretly wanted was for Miss Jeantel to code switch, remove the vernacular from her vocabulary directly rooted in this young woman's experience to make her more appealing to whites and less, quote, embarrassing to the guardians of acceptable blackness." You know, when I hear things like that, who gets to define what is acceptable blackness?
When I saw that type of criticism, Karen, I was horrified. And that says more about the people who are being critical than it does about the young lady.
Of course.
In other words, when you have this status anxiety about how you fit into America, then you'll lash out at poor black people or people perceived to be poor. And that says more about your own status anxiety than about hers.
But I also think that within the black community, we can't do that to each other. We can't you know, we have to be willing to expand the definition of what it is to be an African American in this country.
This woman speaks 3 languages. She's trilingual. And that speaks to immigration reform. We have a smart woman, trilingual, but she's not black in the upscale bougie sense of black. But she's trilingual, and as she doesn't spend her life in a courtroom. And so people attacked her. I thought that was fascinating also.
I just think we as a community need to take a look, you know, inside ourselves as well. Richard Benjamin and Jeff Weiner, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Next, the woman who